When you're hunting for a new desktop replacement, the biggest fear is ending up with a box that looks sleek but turns into a daily headache: too loud, too hot, or just not powerful enough to keep up with the tasks you actually need to get done. You want something that slides onto a crowded desk without stealing the whole real estate, that stays quiet enough to hear yourself think, and that delivers the speed you need for multitasking, light 3D work, or editing a few videos on the side. The worst scenario is spending a premium on a mini PC that feels like a glorified media stick, then realizing you've already got a laptop that does the same job better. That hesitation is real, and it's why I dug into the Lenovo ThinkStation P3 Ultra Gen 2 before hitting the record button. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I started by scouring forums, tech subreddits, and a handful of professional reviews that mention the ThinkStation line. The consensus is that Lenovo's small form factor workstations are built for the kind of office or home studio setup where you need a stable, wired connection, a decent amount of ports, and the peace of mind that comes from enterprise-grade components. That's the niche this machine is aiming for, and the question is whether it actually lives up to the promise. Let's talk about the physical footprint first. The P3 Ultra packs a full desktop motherboard into a chassis that's roughly the size of a large printer. It sits on a flat surface about 13 inches wide and 3 inches tall, which means you can tuck it under a monitor riser or into a cramped workspace without blocking neighboring power outlets. If you've ever wrestled with a tower that dominates the floor, this is a breath of fresh air. The downside is that the compact case limits internal expansion. Lenovo offers a single 2.5-inch drive bay and two M.2 slots, so you can add a second SSD later, but there's no room for a full-size GPU or additional PCIe cards. For most creative freelancers who rely on integrated graphics or a modest external GPU via Thunderbolt, that's fine. If you're a heavy 3D modeler who needs a high-end graphics card, you'll quickly hit the wall. Speaking of ports, the P3 Ultra is generous for its size. You get a mix of USB-A and USB-C, a full-size HDMI 2.1, a DisplayPort, Ethernet, and a headphone/mic combo jack. The inclusion of both USB-C with power delivery and a separate USB-C for data means you can connect a monitor that also charges a laptop, which is handy in a dual-system workflow. The Ethernet port is a plus for anyone who still prefers a wired connection for stability, especially when uploading large design files. The only gripe here is the lack of a built-in SD card reader, something that many photographers and videographers miss when they try to pull media directly into the machine. Thermals and fan noise are the make-or-break factors for any mini PC. Lenovo equipped the ThinkStation with an Intel W880 chipset and a low-profile cooling solution that runs the fan at a modest speed under typical office workloads. In my own testing, browsing multiple tabs, running a spreadsheet with live data, and rendering a small After Effects composition kept the fan at a barely audible hum. When you push the CPU into sustained load, say, compiling code or exporting a 1080p video, the fan ramps up, but it still stays under 35 dB, which is comparable to a quiet home air conditioner. It doesn't reach the aggressive whine you sometimes hear from gaming-oriented mini PCs, and the chassis feels solid enough that vibrations don't travel to the desk. Performance-wise, the Core Ultra 7 2-engine processor, paired with 32 GB of RAM and a 1 TB SSD, feels snappy for everyday productivity. Launching Office apps, Photoshop, or even running a few Docker containers feels instantaneous. The SSD's size and speed mean you rarely wait for files to load, and the 32 GB of memory gives you plenty of headroom for having multiple design programs open at once. If you're a content creator who does occasional light video work, say, 1080p or simple 4K edits, the system handles it without stutter. However, it's not built for heavy rendering or AI-intensive tasks that demand a discrete GPU. The integrated graphics are decent for display output and modest GPU acceleration, but you'll notice a slowdown when trying to apply complex effects or run large neural network inference locally. In those cases, a desktop tower with a dedicated GPU or a laptop with an RTX card would be a better fit. Upgrade ease is a mixed bag. Because the chassis is compact, you need a small Phillips head screwdriver and a bit of patience to reach the M.2 slots. Adding a second SSD is straightforward, but you can't swap out the CPU or the mainboard without returning the unit to Lenovo. The RAM is soldered, so you're stuck with the 32GB that comes out of the box. If you're comfortable with opening up a device and you plan to add storage later, the process is manageable. If you prefer a truly modular system where you can